EMPG Application Series Project and Organization Information.
Welcome to the FY 2023 EMPG Application Video Series Part Number 2. In the previous video, we discussed how to get to the application through MTDS website, some of the login details, and some of the various ways to be able to get back and forth to the application. Now that we've covered that, we can begin the application in earnest. And we'll cover some of the initial overview of the grant and then move on to some of the other. For now, we'll just go ahead and click on Apply. You'll notice that this screen may not pop up for you because I have already begun the process. If not, it'll take you to the next screen anyway. Once it's taken you to this screen, it's good to be able to look over some of these details initially. I'll cover a few of the important things. First, you'll notice some historical and legal precedent for the Emergency Management Performance Grant. You can look that over at your leisure. The key thing to note here is that it is a 50% cost match grant, and it's a reimbursable program, which means that for eligible expenses, you will be reimbursed 50% of the cost that you've already paid out. Also note that it is for local, county, and tribal jurisdictions to be able to apply. All of these are factors to consider when applying for this grant. You'll also notice that there's some Code of Federal Regulations that this grant abides by, and you must abide by as well. I highly recommend that when you have time, you go and look at some of these to know how to operate in these grants. But you don't have to do that right now. You'll also want to refer to the new FY23 NOFO, or Notice of Funding Opportunity, that came out on February 27th. This will be very helpful in also knowing how this grant works from the perspective of FEMA. Next, you'll note some general contact information. And here you'll notice the public link. This public link is the link that you can use to get back to this application at any point in time. You can copy this and save it to your computer so that you have quick, easy access to always return to it, or you can simply use our website as you did before. This is a federal or pass-through grant. That's only so important to you. The next thing you'll notice is that this is the cap for this, as in years previous, is $130,000. This means that that is the federal match. That's the federal side of $130,000. But also keep in mind that for anybody that applies for that, there's also the local match. Your local jurisdiction must match that. So this cap is the cap that we apply for those jurisdictions large enough so that small jurisdictions make sure to get a share of the allocations as well. You'll notice the start date, which is the period of performance start date, is July 1st of this year and goes to June 30th of next year. This is normal with this grant every year. It is non-competitive, and it is requiring a match. However, please note that this 100% for cost match, do not focus on that number or get worried about this. This is how Amplifund calculates certain cash match, cost match systems, so you can disregard this 100%. You'll notice that we opened up the grant on January 4th, and it will close on April 14th at 11:59. We understand that life happens and technology happens, and things might prevent you from being able to submit your application on time. If this is the case and some technical difficulty arises or something happens to prevent you from submitting your application by the deadline, please be sure to contact us at MTDES before the deadline to let us know so that we can either help you get that application in on time, or we have a record that you tried to get it fixed before the end of the deadline. Again, we understand that things happen and we're willing to accommodate when and where we can. Next, you'll notice that there are some attachments here that you may want to reference. This Amplifund Applicant Portal Guide is a guide for applications that Amplifund has built and is only so useful at this point, but may provide a different perspective in how to do things in an application. Feel free to look it over if you still want some different ways to approach the application or want to know how certain things work. Next is more important. This is the FY23 state guidance. I highly recommend, like I did for the resources in the first video, that you read this over carefully so that you understand the grant and what's expected. Once you've done that, feel free to continue. And you'll notice, like what I said before, that this is for county and tribal governments. Next, this is our website that will take you to the EMPG side of it if you want to be able to have a readily accessible link. Finally, here are the detailed contact information should you need to contact us with questions or have concerns. Like I mentioned in the first video, you'll notice as we continue that several buttons appear at both the top of each section and the bottom. I'm going to use this and save and continue from this section. You'll notice, as we've continued, that the check mark appears in the section that we were just in. We've completed that section. You'll also note as we move along here that I've completed this section and pre-filled in some information to make this video easier. This is what it would look like if you had completed it. But since you haven't yet, let's cover over some of the important details for this that you'll need to input. First, for the applicant name, please put in your jurisdiction in EMPG and maybe some other note if needed, but please make sure that it's in a suitable name that shows us your jurisdiction name so that we can organize each of the grants by your jurisdictions. This helps us and you keep things organized and in the proper order. If you were to just put your name, it's difficult to be able to link things up and change names and get things organized in the way that we need to. Next, you'll notice kind of a budget section. Putting things in correctly here will affect how you're able to do your budget later. Typically, you'll come in with an estimate of what you expect your total direct costs for your jurisdiction for emergency management to be. And then you want to be able to know how to translate that into the grant. Well, that's relatively simple. First, you'll notice that the award requested, so think of this as the award, the federal amount requested, this should be 50% of that total direct cost that you came in with the budget ready to put in. So in this first box, be sure to put in the 50% of the direct total cost that you came in with. Next, you'll notice the cash match requirement, because of what we put in here, automatically fills in this section, which means that the cash match that you should be matching, your jurisdiction should be matching, should also match this number. So you'll notice that this field and this field will total up to your total direct cost. Putting this in correctly will help fix things so that you have a correct budget set up later down the road. Next is just some of the primary contact information. It's important to put this in correctly so that we can make sure to contact you should we need to in regards to the grant or your program. If you have any updated information, please be sure to update it here and let us know. You'll notice this section is fairly straightforward and fairly easy to fill out. But if for whatever reason you need to begin filling it out and return later, just as with other sections, you can always save and then return later. Once you've filled everything out, and especially those fields that have an asterisk, those are required, then you can come down and mark it as complete. This will give the check mark and show that everything's done so that you know you don't have to return to this section later if you do not want to. For now, we'll go on and save and continue. Now you'll notice it's taken us to the forms section. There are 4 forms here that you have to complete in order to finish this third section. We'll cover each of these 4 forms for you to help you get you through it. In this video, we're just going to finish covering this first form. organizational information, and approvals. In the next video, we will cover the applicant assessment and the baseline requirements. You have to complete each of these forms in order to be able to mark this third section complete. You'll notice that the status here for some is marked in progress for some, complete for some, and new for some. Be sure, in order to mark this section as complete, that each of these statuses is marked as complete in order to continue. Also note that you have an option to print each of these forms individually so that you can have a hard copy and look them over. Feel free to do that if you wish. Now that we've covered the basics, let's move on to the first form. Here you will note some of the same overview information that we covered previously. Feel free to read this over and get an idea of how the program's supposed to work. When you're ready, we can continue. The principal executive official or commissioner or chairman or whoever it may be that is ultimately responsible for any projects and any fiscal responsibility, that chief executive is who we're looking for in this first field. Please be sure to have the correct, accurate information here for both informational purposes as well as grant documentation. Next, we would prefer to have a fiscal officer. This is typically somebody in the finance department that deals with your grant and is familiar with how things are set up. Sometimes jurisdictions do not have this, and you can put in a DES coordinator when needed, but it's helpful to have somebody from the finance department that we can contact from the finance side of things when we can. Next, you'll notice the secondary point of contact. This is often a deputy, and what you select in this will open up certain fields. A quick note is that throughout the application, you'll note that this happens. Depending upon the answer to the question, certain fields may appear or disappear. Please also note that there will be some asterisks, some required fields that come up depending upon your answer. You may ask why there isn't a primary point of contact. That's because we got that in the previous section. So that's why there's not a primary point of contact in this list. Next is a couple of administrative things. As mentioned before, this is a county or tribal government grant, so you'll need to select which type it is. You'll also want to tell us how many people will be paid with EMPG funds. This is important so that we know how you're structuring things for your program. Next, you'll want to select which district you fall in under from Montana DES. If you're not certain which district your jurisdiction falls under, please let us know and get in contact with us, and we will help walk you through that. Next, you'll notice some forms. This is important to follow through carefully because doing this in the right order will help make sure your process for forms goes smoothly. First, you'll want to use click on the template and use it in order to be able to get the correct template. As soon as you've downloaded it, please be sure that you've either enabled it and then saved it to your computer. Saving it to your computer is a key component in order for you to be able to edit the document, return later and change it, finalize it, and then to be able to upload it. If you do not save it and you proceed to fill it out without having saved it to your computer, you will notice that you have difficulty uploading it later. Once you've done that and you've saved it to your computer and filled out all the needed information, then you can come here and choose the file from your computer. If you've gone through and done revisions or found that you do not need a document, remember that you can always use this trash can in order to be able to delete it from the set of files. Each of these first few files are an important part of your application. The annual time certification form is one that's needed, and we'll cover more later. Next, you'll notice a spot here for the unique entity identification number. This is what used to be the DUNS number, or the Data Universal Number System. The federal government, back in April of last year, has gone away from the DUNS number and has moved to the Unique Entity Identification Number. And this number is also not your employer identification number. That's different. So typically you can get this UEI from your finance department, but you'll want to specify with them that this isn't the EIN. This is the UEI. I know this all sounds complicated, but this is how you're registered with the federal government through sam.gov and how they're able to keep you distinct. This is going to be a 12-digit alphanumeric code or number. And alphanumeric is where you both have letters and numbers that keeps your organization distinct. In order for us to be able to give you an award, we have to have this UEI number. Many of you have it from last year, and many of you can get it from your finance department. Please have this number entered into your application so that this is a smoother process. If you have trouble, sam.gov has some troubleshooting methods, and if you continue to have trouble, please get in touch with us so that we can make sure that you get this number. Another required form will be the signed assurances form. Similar as to what we covered above, please be sure to save this document, fill it out, save again, and then upload the document here when you're completed and ready. Another required one is the applicant agent designation letter. This designates you in order to be able to fill out the application and perform the grant. That makes you the authorized representative. Similarly as to above, make sure to save and upload the document correctly. Finally, you'll notice the annual phone and utility justification forms. These only apply to you if you're trying to claim phone and utilities on your budget and for your EMPG program. If not, then don't worry about filling these out and uploading them. Once you're done, you can always save it. And regardless, you can always save it and return later if you need to complete it later. And when you're finished, you can mark it as complete. Notice that if you haven't done everything correctly, that a red box will appear at the top letting you know that there are fields that are required that you haven't done. Also note that Amplifund gives you red text at each of those locations where you have required information and have not put them in. Once you have put everything in, you should be able to mark it as complete and continue. Now that you've done that, you can click on Save and Continue, and you'll notice that it moves you automatically to the second form in the list. That covers it for this second video. In this video, we covered over some of the opportunity details and background information, along with getting things input for the project information as well as the organizational information. In the next video, we'll cover the next two forms, which is the applicant assessment and the baseline requirements.